chances are that at least a few of you watching this video were pretty young back in 2014. Others like me were already getting on a bit. Either way, 10 years have passed since the space game genre made a rather amazing comeback, and all of it kicked off with Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen. Back in April of 2014, I got access to the alpha build of the latest Elite game, and honestly, I was seriously impressed, actually completely blown away. The flight model, the environments, the graphics, it was all entirely unlike any space game that had been released up until that point. After years of the space game genre being asleep and in decline, there was basically no other games out there except for the X franchise. I thought we were about to enter an entirely new age for the genre thanks to the release of Elite, Star Citizen, and all the rest that were to follow. 10 years later, looking back, was I right? Well, yes, but not quite in the way I expected. Here then is a look at the past 10 years of the space game genre, how it made an unexpected and some might say dramatic comeback, how we have seen a massive flow of amazing space games, the highs, the lows, and also how things today are not quite how I imagined they would be. So, the true beginnings of the new age of space games goes back a little further than 10 years. For that, we actually have to go back to 2012, the year of Kickstarter. This is a little bit of a detour away from the space game story, but it is a key moment, one which arguably was vital to the re-emergence of the much-loved genre. In February of 2012 then, Double Fine, the studios containing talent that created the much-loved Monkey Island series, took to Kickstarter. They had plans for a new adventure game, but didn't have the funds for it. Crowdfunding was, and at the time, extremely unconventional choice. Up until that moment, no established game studio had pursued crowdfunding on a large level. Keep in mind that 2012 was a time where early access was not an established business model. In fact, generally speaking, only extremely small studios or one-person teams had attempted it, 2009's Minecraft and Notch being a prime example. The wider industry would not adopt the early access model for a few more years.
And that's when it occurred to me, Kickstarter. We can use Kickstarter to make a fan-funded old-school adventure game. It's perfect. We got the perfect team here at Double Fine to make it. We got the inventor of the genre here, Ron Gilbert. Oh look, there he is right now. Maybe he'll help us. He'll help us.
The Double Fine Kickstarter campaign then was an interesting one. Initially for a vaguely described adventure titled Double Fine Adventure, later released as Broken Age. The campaign played heavily on nostalgia, a return to the games of yesteryear. After all, there was a deep craving for titles such as Monkey Island, and no one was making them. Now, the Kickstarter campaign had a funding goal of $400,000, and it blew through this extremely quickly, and ultimately hit a total fund of $3.3 million from around about 87,000 backers. It was unexpected and sent massive, huge ripple effects throughout the industry. Very soon, more and more companies and people using Kickstarter to fund new game projects, many of them from old-school developers bringing back old and loved franchises. Wasteland 2, the precursor to Fallout, Pillars of Eternity from developers who worked on Baldur's Gate and Planescape Torment, and of course, the Kickstarter for the Oculus Rift, which in turn gave rise to modern VR. All of that then, 2012's success in crowdfunding set the stage for the return of Chris Roberts and David Braben to the space game genre. Chris Roberts, of course, was famed for his 90s hit Wing Commander video games, and Braben for the Elite series. Both of these creators went to Kickstarter, although Roberts initially set up his campaign on a dedicated website, although after a short period opened a related campaign on Kickstarter. Star Citizen from Chris Roberts went on to be the most crowdfunded project of any type in history. Today, nearly 12 years after the initial campaign, Star Citizen stands at over $700 million in funding. Whilst Braben's new Elite project wasn't quite as successful as Star Citizen, it nonetheless also heavily rode the nostalgia train. Reaching a total of £1.5 million in 2024, both Elite and Star Citizen are often among the most discussed space games. The bottom line is that Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen pretty much have both laid the groundwork to make the revival of the space genre possible, but not only the revival, the complete transformation of it. Here's a few other games that have been highly influential over the past 10 years. So, Space Engineers, developed by Keen Software, released initially through Early Access in 2013, at the time when Early Access was really starting to take hold, and it officially launched in 2019, quite a few years later. It's a voxel-based sandbox game that emphasizes engineering, construction, exploration, and survival in space and on planets. Now, what sets Space Engineers apart is its focus on creativity and engineering. The game allows players to build and manage complex structures from spaceships to planetary outposts using a highly detailed physics engine. Now, the emphasis on player-driven creativity and problem-solving really has inspired a dedicated community of modders and content creators as well, and they've really expanded the game's possibilities far beyond the original scope that was there back in 2013-2014. Space Engineers then has really highlighted the potential of sandbox space games and offers a unique blend of freedom and challenge. It allows players to set their own goals and create their own adventures, and really has demonstrated that a game doesn't need a fixed storyline to be engaging, much like Minecraft, Terraria and other such games, except this time set very firmly in space. So this approach has certainly influenced other sandbox survival games and has encouraged developers to provide players with tools to create their own experiences. The game's success has also shown the viability of early access as a development model, being among the very early titles that followed that particular model. In short, Space Engineers has certainly been instrumental in redefining what a space game can be, and has emphasized creativity, community involvement, and the importance of player agency. It also continues to maintain a decent number of players. Elsewhere, No Man's Sky, developed by Hello Games, has become one of the most remarkable comeback stories in the space game genre. Not only that genre, but also, gaming industry in general. Initially launched in 2016 to mixed reviews, and I think that's an understatement, and significant criticism for not meeting player expectations, the game has since undergone a dramatic transformation. What makes No Man's Sky particularly influential is its journey from a cautionary tale to a celebrated example of post-launch redemption. Through a series of substantial free updates, Hello Games has continuously expanded and redefined the game, turning it into a rich and immersive space exploration experience. Now, over time, these updates really have introduced a ton of new features, including dynamic weather systems, diverse biomes, complex alien ecosystems, significantly enhancing the game's universe as well. Ultimately, the game's evolution has highlighted the importance of developer commitment and community engagement. I think Hello Games are perhaps one of the best examples out there of a developer who really wants to please their community, and Hello Games understood this a long time ago. You simply don't let your community there to fester. Hello Games' then dedication to improving No Man's Sky has not only won back the trust from its player base, but also set a new standard for how games can evolve post-launch, and yeah, this is right across the industry. Its ongoing support has demonstrated that even a rocky start can be turned around with the persistence and clear vision for the future. No Man's Sky has certainly pushed the boundaries then of what space exploration games can offer, and I think it's one of the finest examples out there of what space exploration can be about. Its procedure-generated universe allows for virtually endless exploration, and in turn encourages players to discover and interact with a vast array of planets and life forms. What particularly makes this more interesting and more engaging is that over time, Hello Games continue to add more content to that universe. So unlike some other space games out there which get stale and old over time, once you've seen it all, Hello Games just keep adding the new stuff. Overall then, No Man's Sky has certainly played a crucial role in redefining the space game genre, perhaps more so than any other game out there over the past 10 years. Its transformation from a controversial release to a beloved title really does underscore the potential for growth and innovation in the industry, and it serves as a really powerful example of how continuous development and community focus can lead to lasting success. And this is evidenced by the sheer amount of players that continue to engage with the game. It's clearly perhaps the most popular space game out there right now. Stellaris, developed by Paradox Interactive, has established itself as a cornerstone of the grand strategy genre since its release back in 2016. So what sets Stellaris apart? Well, it's the innovative blend of 4X, that's explore, expand, exploit, exterminate, the 4X mechanics, and these really do have deep grand strategy elements, creating a unique and immersive experience for players. The game's influence on the genre is certainly profound, offering unparalleled freedom in building and managing interstellar empires. Players can choose from a myriad of alien races or create their own, each with unique traits and abilities, navigating a galaxy teeming with over 1,000 stars and numerous AI opponents. So this level of customization and complexity has set a new standard for strategy games, encouraging players to think creatively and strategically. Stellaris also emphasizes emergent storytelling through its gameplay. Each decision made by the player impacts the unfolding narrative of their civilization, leading to a dynamic and a personalized experience. It's a focus that's really on storytelling with a grand strategy framework and has inspired other games to incorporate similar elements, blending narrative depth with that strategic gameplay. So the game's continuous evolution through frequent updates and expansions, such as the Machine Age and the Andromeda patch, demonstrates Paradox's Interactive's commitment to keeping the game fresh and engaging. And whilst I know there's plenty of comments and complaints out there about the sheer abundance of DLC from Paradox, it nonetheless has dramatically changed the nature of Stellaris, making it a very deep game over time. Stellaris then, just like with No Man's Sky and Space Engineers, really does highlight that games can and should really grow over time. They can become something very different to how they started out. Today then, Stellaris stands as perhaps one of the finest examples of grand strategy games in the games industry, not just the space genre. Now moving on, we come to something a little bit more unique, a little bit more niche, shall we say. That's Star Trek Bridge Crew. It's developed by Red Storm Entertainment and it was published by Ubisoft. It made a significant impact actually back in its day in 2017 and was primarily a VR title. The game offers a highly immersive experience and places players in the roles of officers aboard a Federation starship. Now what made Star Trek Bridge Crew particularly influential is its pioneering use of VR to create an authentic and engaging Star Trek experience. Designed specifically for VR, and whilst it can be placed without VR, they did really add a bit of flexibility there in making the game accessible. But ultimately, it did showcase the potential of VR to enhance gameplay and immersion. The game's emphasis on cooperative gameplay has also set it apart. Players must work together to manage ship operations, make strategic decisions, and ensure the safety of the crew and vessels. It's a collaborative approach that has highlighted the potential for VR to facilitate social cooperative experiences in games. Now, Star Trek Bridge Crew has also contributed to the genre through its commitment to delivering an authentic Star Trek experience, something you don't see too often nowadays. The inclusion of various missions and scenarios along with the additional content from the next generation has allowed players to engage with the Star Trek universe in a very deep way. For example, you can sit there and be the comms officer, you can sit there and be the captain, and this is a very unique and very interesting approach. Now, despite the cessation of the post-launch support as of 2024, I do believe, Bridge Crew nonetheless stands out as a really good example of how to successfully do multi-crew, something that a lot of other games have tried to do and very few have achieved successfully. I'd like to say that Bridge Crew has been influential in the sense that it's encouraged other games out there to create the same type of experience. Unfortunately, that hasn't really been the case, but nonetheless, it remains an example of what is possible. Meanwhile, X4 Foundations, which arrived in 2018 from Egosoft, is another game that's renowned for depth and also realism. The game has significantly evolved over the years with continuous updates and expansions that have kept it relevant and engaging. There's been plenty of these too. Now, what really sets X4 Foundations apart is its blend of space trading, combat and empire building. Some would say that arguably this is the true definition of a space sim that was set originally all the way back in the 80s by Elite and then Frontier Elite 2 some years later. But it's an approach to gaming that we just haven't seen, even though in the 90s this is what a space sim was all about. Elite Dangerous kind of went in a different direction with its objective of being a multiplayer experience. X4, on the other hand, is exclusively a single-player game, and it has a complexity and level of freedom that really does set a standard for space simulation, something I don't think there's any other examples out there that quite go to the degree of what you can do with X4. Now, the recent 7.00 update introduces numerous enhancements, including the reimagined Teladi and Argon capital ships, new sectors and landmarks, improved AI, and revamped external camera systems. These updates not only improve the game's mechanics, but also expand its universe, providing new challenges and opportunities for exploration. In short, if you like the idea of taking on a single ship and a few credits and building your way up to not only a more powerful and a more advanced ship, but also owning a whole fleet of ships, not to mention a whole industry of space stations and network of commerce, then X4 is certainly the game you should try out. There's nothing else quite like it. It really is, it's an amazing experience. In my opinion then, it's perhaps the best example of what a space sim can be. Now, unlike the other games in this video, X4 wasn't really, the path for this wasn't really laid by Elite or by a Star Citizen in the modern era at least. The X franchise was here from the late 90s onwards. In fact, the whole X series was primarily there and kept the X space game genre alive during the great drought of games from this genre. So nice to see it still surviving and also being pretty darn popular today. Look at these player numbers, it's still doing very, very well. Now, over the years, I think the space game genre, perhaps right from the start, has always been a niche genre. And that when it comes to niche games, there's perhaps nothing quite so niche as Outer Wilds. Yet this in turn turned out to be something very successful and very, very engaging. Perhaps one of the most critically acclaimed indie games released for many years. It's a game that has an interesting take. It places you in an ever-evolving solar system, offering a unique blend of exploration, puzzle solving and storytelling. Now here, players take on the role of an astronaut exploring a small handcrafted solar system where every 22 minutes the sun goes supernova, and this in turn resets the universe. It's a cyclic nature that encourages players to experiment and uncover the secrets of an ancient alien race known only as the Nomai, and then hopefully get to the bottom of the mystery of the time loop. The game's dynamic world changes with each loop, fostering a sense of discovery and encouraging players to piece together the narrative through exploration. Now, the game certainly has a charm, and that lies in its open-ended exploration and the sense of wonder that it really does instill. Each celestial body in the game offers unique challenges and environments, from the treacherous gravity of Brittled Hollow to the eerie depths of Dark Bramble. It's a variety that not only keeps the gameplay fresh, but also emphasises the importance of curiosity and perseverance in uncovering the game's mysteries. Outer Wilds has certainly been influential in demonstrating the potential for indie games to deliver profound and emotionally resonant experiences, something that we really don't see very often anymore in the AAA circles. Despite occasionally frustrations with its controls, and I remember having a few of those myself, and sometimes the difficulty of some of the puzzles, the game certainly has been, it's been an innovative gameplay that a lot of people very much praise. I think The Outer Wilds, perhaps more than any other game in this genre, proves that you don't need to go big to actually be big. And talking of big, my favourite space game of 2023 was EVERSPACE 2. This was developed by Rockfish Games, and it's made a notable impact on the space combat genre ever since its release. I think definitively it is the best space combat shooter out there. So unlike its roguelike predecessor, EVERSPACE 2 offers a more traditional action RPG experience, combining the arcade dogfights with the depth of an expansive explorable galaxy. There's a whole bunch of different star systems here, and you can pretty much go where you want as long as you've unlocked those particular areas, which happens whilst playing the story. So the game is certainly fast-paced. There's some great combat here. The players will explore the galaxy that's filled with side missions, puzzles, combat challenges, and provides a rich and varied experience that really goes beyond the simple dogfighting. The game's extensive ship customization options allow players to equip their ships with a variety of weapons, shields, and special abilities, and this really in turn allows them to tailor loadouts to suit their specific playstyle. It's a level of customization that is, I think at this point, a new standard for what we can expect in the space games, and it encourages players to really experiment with different builds and strategies. EVERSPACE 2 has also demonstrated the potential for continuous improvement and expansions through various updates, and this is something I think we're seeing as a bit of a repeating pattern here throughout this video. Games that have done well tend to be the ones that really do listen to player feedback and give the players exactly what they want. The recent Incursion update has added new events, legendary gear and cosmetic ship modules which enhance the game's replayability and keep the player base engaged. Additionally, the upgrade to Unreal Engine 5 has provided some improved graphics and overall performance, and really kept the game up to date and ready for the future updates. In short, I really do feel that EVERSPACE 2 has pushed the combat section, the combat side of the space games forward. It's something that's really nice to see, all the more so due to the fact that it also includes some RPG elements, as well as, of course, being a looter-shooter, something that, well, generally it's a hybrid of a variety of different things, and it works very, very well indeed. So the past 10 years have been very interesting for the space genre. We've got a lot of games that have not only kind of redefined the genre in many different ways, but also led to entirely new experiences, some very interesting ones at that, very deeply immersive. And of course, it hasn't all been perfect. There's been some pretty big misses as well. Things such as the reaction and reception to Homeworld 3, which hasn't been exactly stellar. Kerbal Space Program 2, perhaps one of the biggest space game disasters of all time. Very, very bad. And Starfield, that's still got some mixed opinions on it. A lot of people seem to be enjoying it still, although it just doesn't have anywhere near the numbers, the typical player numbers of a regular Bethesda game. But I've spoken about these things at length in other videos, and I'm not going to recount those particular elements here. I think overall the past 10 years has certainly been much better for space games than it has not been. But then there's the question I posed at the start of the video. Back in 2012, I thought we were heading towards a new era for space games, and I said I've kind of realised that things didn't turn out quite as I expected. And what did I mean by that? Well, it's clear at this point that the genre did indeed pretty much awaken and reinvigorate itself, and we got some amazing games. What ultimately happened is that the games industry as a whole changed, and I've kind of hinted at that throughout this video. To start with, back in 2012, early access wasn't much of a thing, and that's become very much of a thing in the modern age. Also, monetization. Games, pretty much any live service game is now fully monetized. In fact, back in 2012, I don't think, live service games did exist, MMOs certainly, but they weren't the be-all and end-all. Not every game was expected to be a live service title, and that is a very different situation today. Cosmetics also weren't all pervasive, they weren't everywhere, and today I think cosmetics are pretty much everywhere and anywhere. Where they can be integrated, they will be, and if they're not, they will be shoehorned in. Another thing that's changed, I feel, over the past decade or so is that a lot of games are trying to push themselves for broader and broader appeal. Arguably, that's one of the problems that both Kerbal Space Program 2, if you listen to some of the videos out there, as well as Starfield suffered from. The idea that just containing themselves to their original audience wouldn't be enough, and they need to go mass market. Naturally, that meant specific design changes to appeal to that mass market. I think all of these things combined together have ultimately dramatically changed the games industry over the past 10 to 12 years. It's a very different thing to it was back in 2010, 2011 and 2012, and that in turn means that it has had an impact on the type of space games we expect to see today. I think that's a story for another time though, something I think we can delve deeply into in an upcoming video. Either way, let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below, and thanks for watching this video all the way through. It's been a very long one. Do check out the other video on the screen right here if you still want to watch a few more. Thanks for watching, I'll catch you next time, and do take care.